A guy reincarnates into another world, awakening a powerful ability called water manipulation. A skill that doesn't just make water his domain, but also lets him tame fierce aquatic beasts, turning them into his loyal pets. But he doesn't stop there. As he evolves them, pushing them past their natural limits until they become terrifying sea monsters. Now let's dive in. The story takes place in a distant land, where Liang Ku stood dazed, taking in the breathtaking view of the rising sun. The golden light painted the sky, and the fresh, cold breeze of the morning filled his lungs. It was peaceful, almost surreal. But before he could fully lose himself in the moment, his father's voice called out to him, snapping him back as if it were a sound he hadn't heard in years. Yet, despite that, it felt familiar, warm, comforting. Without a second thought, he rushed to his father, determined to make the most of the day. They spent the morning on the lake, checking on the fish they had caught. It was like any other day, but it was fun. Probably the most fun he had in a long time. Like how a crab managed to latch onto his foot, his father nearly choking on their food from laughing too hard, and even leaving some carved scribbles on the side of their boat just for the hell of it. It was simple, but it was enough to make him forget everything else. He hadn't even realized how quickly time passed until the sun was already setting. But before heading back with their catch, they decided to sit by the shore and enjoy the view a little longer. That was when he noticed a red carp swimming by, its scales glimmering under the fading sunlight. It was a rare sight, and so without hesitation, Liang Ku dived into the water. But the moment he hit the surface, fish was gone and everything around him. The lake was empty with no signs of life, and no matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't move forward, like something was holding him in place. And suddenly his chest tightened, his limbs grew heavier, and the only thing on his mind was hoping his father would pull him out. But the world around him dimmed, and just like that he woke up. Except his father wasn't there. Instead, two strangers stood in front of him, and that's when reality hit. The day with his father was all just a dream. In truth, he was tied up, captured by these bastards. Zhang had tricked him, making him believe he was guiding them. But in reality, they just wanted to use him as bait for the water monster. A cruel fate, but Liang Ku remained calm. Because this wasn't his first life, Liang Ku was a transmigrator from another world. It had already been a month since he arrived in this world, taking over this body. The original owner had died from an illness, and somehow he ended up here in his place. His mother died in childbirth, leaving him to be raised by his father alone. And for years, it was just the two of them, until 3 months ago, when his father succumbed to a respiratory disease. But now, all those emotions, the grief, the loneliness and the longing, had become his own, and that was something new for him, as he had never known what it felt like to grow up with a family. Still, in the past month, he had adapted to the former owner's relationships and daily life. He had also discovered something else. This world wasn't normal. It possessed extraordinary powers. People here could train their bodies and minds to reach incredible states, surpassing human limits. Those who succeeded were called cultivators. But it wasn't just humans who could evolve through training. Animals could too. And those who did were known as mythical beasts. And speaking of the devil, one had just appeared, right below them. Even Zhang, a seasoned cultivator, felt his legs go weak the moment he laid eyes on it. He had expected the water beast to be about half a meter long, but it turns out the info was all wrong. And the moment it surfaced, it easily rocked the boat, sending ripples of panic through everyone on board. Still, Zhang wasn't the type to go down without a fight. He had trained for 10 years, and if this thing wanted to swallow them whole, it would have to work for it. So the second the beast lunged closer, he went all in, unleashing his strongest move to meet it halfway. But motherfucker was huge. Its jaws alone were bigger than him. And before he could even process what was happening, he was gone, swallowed whole like a bite-sized snack, and the boat shattered into pieces in the process. And so the old guy was absolutely panicking. He never planned to die here. This wasn't part of the script. But the way things were going, he needed a plan, and fast. And that's when the bright idea hit him. So without hesitation, he stabbed our boy's hand and shoved him straight into the water, hoping the blood would serve as a distraction. And because Liang Ku was still tied up, his body sank straight down, dragged by the weight of his restraints. But he wasn't going down without a fight. He thrashed against the ropes and then bited. His teeth clamped down hard, tearing at the rough fibers. It wasn't easy, but after a few agonizing moments, the ropes loosened just enough for him to break free. But now there was another problem. His oxygen was running out, and he had already sunk too deep. His vision blurred, darkness creeping in at the edges. And that's when vision started appearing again. His father's arm extended toward him, And though Liang Qiu knew it wasn't real, his body moved on instinct, reaching out. And that's when his hand found something solid. It was a log, the same log from his father's boat, the one they had carved their faces into all those years ago. A rush of emotions hit him all at once. Gratitude, relief, even a small bit of warmth despite the freezing water around him. Somehow, even in death, his father had saved him once again. But that moment didn't last, because the blood from his wound had already spread, and the monster had caught his scent. Before he could react, sharp teeth clamped onto his leg. The next thing he knew, he was being dragged downward, deeper into the lake. The pressure built up in his chest, and the light from above faded completely as the beast pulled him into the depths of its lair. And what he saw there sent a shiver down his spine. Countless bodies, long since devoured, wrecked boats, shattered into pieces, and treasure, piles of it, glimmering like a cruel joke in the darkness. This was it. He had done everything he could to survive, but it was obvious now. There was no escaping this. So with what little breath he had left, he closed his eyes and whispered a silent apology to his father, because soon he would be joining him. But the water beast was just like cut that shit out and slammed him to the ground, toying with him like a predator playing with its food. Pain shot through his body. But then something happened. His blood, drifting through the water, seeped into the lakebed and touched something ancient, a forgotten treasure buried beneath the wreckage, a water cauldron, and within it, an ancient being stirred. In that moment, power surged through Liang Qiu's body, something foreign yet strangely familiar. It adapted to him, shaping itself into a form he could instinctively understand, something akin to the games he used to play before he transmigrated. A power manifested in the form of a game system, and its primary ability, water manipulation. The change was immediate. The water around him was no longer his enemy, it was his domain. His wounds closed, his body strengthened, and suddenly, it felt as if he was standing on solid ground, as if water resistance no longer existed for him, making him question how any of this was possible. And as if responding to his thoughts, a system notification popped up, explaining everything. He had obtained a skill water control which grants the ability to manipulate water currents, and allows breathing underwater. A powerful skill, one that turned the depths of the lake into his battlefield. But before he could even process his newfound abilities, the beast struck again, lunging forward to finally devour him. But this time, Liang Qiu wasn't helpless. With just a thought, the water twisted and surged, catching the beast mid-swim and suspending it in place. A rush of power filled him, an intoxicating feeling that made him realize, if he was underwater, he had no limits. But reality quickly set in. This power was new. He had only just awakened it, meaning his control was far from perfect. The beast struggled, breaking free from his grip. It lunged again. But with his newfound mobility, he easily dodged the attack, slipping through the water like it was second nature. Still, dodging alone wouldn't get him anywhere. Without a weapon, he needed another way to take this beast down. And just as that thought crossed his mind, the system responded. Turns out he wasn't just a simple waterbender, as he had other skill called blood domination. Through his own blood, he could inscribe ancient runes, forming a contract with aquatic spirit beasts, a revelation that made his pulse quicken. As this was exactly what he needed, and in just a second he already had a plan. The moment the beast surged toward him again, he used water control, forcing it to stop just long enough to inscribe the necessary runes, creating a blood domination talisman. As soon as the beast broke free from his waterhold, he weaved around its massive form and slammed the talisman onto its head. But forming a contract was easier said than done. It was a battle of spiritual force. The beast fought back, lashing out with the intent to crush his very soul. His vision darkened, his body stiffened, and for a moment, it felt like the creature's will was completely overwhelming his own. But unfortunately for it, our boy had a soul that had lived twice, and with its combined strength, Liang Qiu was able to push back. His soul energy surged and overpowered the beast's resistance, and in the end he won. The contract was sealed, and thus, Liang Qiu floated back to the surface, breaking through the water with a deep, desperate inhale. The air filled his lungs, and for the first time since the whole ordeal began, he could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The beast emerged right after him, no longer an enemy, but an ally. Its massive form loomed over the lake. Its eyes locked onto Liang Qiu with a newfound reverence. It had fully submitted to him. Still, there was one problem. He couldn't exactly stroll back into the village with a big-ass water beast at his side. That would cause all kinds of problems, so he ordered it to stay behind. And thanks to their newly formed spiritual link, he could summon it whenever he needed, and vice versa. And with that, the beast disappeared into the depths, retreating to its hidden lair. A good place to lay low. And as for Liang Ku, it was time to get out of here. The next day, the old man who had thrown Liang Ku in as bait arrived at the village, dragging along his crew and Steward Zheng. They weren't here for condolences. Assuming Liang Ku was already dead, the old geezer had his sights set on something else. His father's fortune. In his mind, it was compensation for the botched mission. After all, their plan had failed, Zhao was dead, and someone had to pay for it. With that in mind, they marched straight to Liang Ku's house. The moment they reached the door, they kicked it wide open, expecting an empty room. Instead, they froze, because standing right there was Liang Ku. For a moment, the entire group just stared, dumbfounded. But that shock didn't last long. Steward Zheng's face twisted in pure rage towards the old geezer as he didn't check his facts right. But it didn't matter. The steward was already convinced that Liang Ku was responsible for botching the mission, and someone had to take the fall for it. So he didn't even hesitate ordering his men to restrain him and teach him a lesson. Apparently, Zhao's death wasn't just an inconvenience. It had cost Zheng a lot of money. Not to mention, the entire village was now in danger because the beast was still out there. And according to them, that was all Liang Ku's fault. Which obviously was complete bullshit. So Liang Ku refuted everything, pinning the real blame back onto the old man. But of course, the bastard was too cunning to let himself get cornered. Instead, he flipped the script, pointing out Liang Ku's miraculous survival. How could a brat possibly return alive unless he was working with the beast? And just like that, the accusation changed. Now Liang Ku wasn't just a troublemaker. He was a monster. He had controlled the water beast. He was responsible for Zhao's death. It was an absurd claim, but Liang Ku wasn't a stranger to being labeled a freak. In his previous life, he had been an orphan, so the kids in school looked at him like he was some bad omen, a walking misfortune. Rumors spread that orphans were cursed or had a habit of stealing, and no matter what he did, the stigma never left. But he wasn't about to roll over and take it, because he ain't bitch made. And if there was one thing he refused to let happen, it was getting pushed around, especially by someone uglier than him. This bastard was already missing a tooth, so Liang Ku decided to help him add a few more to the count. And now was no different. Even if it meant revealing his power, Liang Ku wasn't folding to these bastards. Not now. Not ever. So without hesitation, he tackled the old goose, shoving him back with enough force to send him stumbling, and locked onto the nearest basin of water. They wanted him to be a monster so bad? Fine. He'd show them what a real monster looked like. Water surged up his arm, twisting and coiling like a living serpent. His anger sharpened his focus, and for a moment, he was ready to take every single one of them to the grave. But just as he was about to unleash hell, his childhood friend appeared, rushing in alongside the village chief. The chief's voice cut through the chaos, carrying a weight that even Steward Zheng couldn't ignore. And even though the old man looked ancient, he was still an official of the dynasty, someone with real authority. That meant Zheng couldn't do shit. And so the steward had no choice but to comply. But before storming off, he shot the chief a glare filled with venom, as he assured them that his master Zhao would hear about this. But the old G wasn't fazed. He knew this was just a hollow threat, because even the steward's master would bow to him. After that, Liang Ku let out a slow breath, then turned to the village chief, giving him a nod of thanks. And with nothing else left to do, they left as well. But Liang Ku knew better. This wasn't the end. Situations like this would keep happening over and over, unless he did something about it. So he made a decision. If he wanted to survive in this world, he had to use his system to the fullest and get stronger, fast. That's when he noticed something strange. His water essence was increasing. First, he wasn't sure why, but then it clicked. His crocodile pet had something to do with it. Intrigued, he waited for nightfall before heading back to the lake, and then activated his spirit link to call out to his water beast. And when it finally surfaced, it was bite-sized, completely surprising Liang Ku, and he was about to start asking questions when the system chimed in, explaining that due to being subdued, contracted beasts can adjust their body size at will to manage energy consumption. And that actually made sense. But he wasn't here to admire his pet's new party trick. He wanted to know where this water essence was coming from. So, he commanded his little companion to show him the way. Immediately, the croc dived in and Liang Ku followed. The water beast led him deeper into the lake, weaving through the murky depths before slipping into a hidden underwater cave. The moment Liang Ku stepped inside, his eyes widened. Countless legendary spirit plants sprawled across the cave floor, glowing faintly with rich spiritual energy. He reached out, brushing his fingers against one, and immediately a system prompt popped up, giving him the option to absorb. This was a loot drop he wasn't about to pass up. In this world, spiritual materials and treasures absorbed extraordinary energies over time, making them incredibly valuable. Spirit plants, in particular, possessed unique effects depending on their properties. And rumor had it that in Zhao Manor's backyard, there was a frozen pond where special vines grew at the bottom. These vines were so rare and powerful that Master Zhao used them to lure cultivators into servitude. That's how precious they were. And yet, here he was, standing in a cave full of them. If he absorbed them, they'd definitely boost his water essence. Exactly what he needed. So without wasting any time, he got to work. He gathered everything he could. He considered asking his beast for help, but when he glanced over, the crock was already full, having eaten a few plants itself. It was already bloated and floating around. So he decided to let it rest. It earned a nap for leading him here. After gathering everything, Liang Qiu wasted no time. He started devouring the plants, and with just one plant, his water essence increased by 1. Not only that, these spirit plants were delicious, which made it way too easy for him to gobble them up one after another. And he kept eating, absorbing as much water essence as possible. The more he had, the better his fusion with aquatic spirits and the faster his aquatic beasts could evolve. And there were a lot of plants. So much so that for a moment, he became a fat ass. But it is worth it, as he had gained 25 water essence. Immediately, he invested it into his fusion with the water monkey bloodline, increasing it from 5% to 7.5, a significant boost in power. With this, he was confident that if he ever ran into those bastards from before, he could take them on easily. But that could wait. Right now, he had a more pressing issue, and that he is broke. And autumn was coming to an end, and during this season, crocodiles slowed down due to hibernation, meaning he couldn't rely on them for hunting when that time came. So the plan was simple. He needs to exploit them now and get as much profit as possible before they became useless. With that in mind, he had his croc hunt as many fish as it could, stacking up a huge haul, and selling them. And the merchants in this world weren't like the hustling vendors from his previous life. They were way easier to convince. And just like that, his financial struggles were covered. Now, he was on to the next step. It was time to settle things with that old geezer who tried to set him up. But before he could even make a move, the bastard set himself up perfectly. Apparently, the old man was trying to search for him to apologize for the misunderstanding earlier, and to show his sincerity, he invited Liang Qiu to a meal, on his boat, just the two of them, which made Liang Qiu nearly laughed out loud. It was so blatantly obvious what he was trying to do. But instead of calling him out, he played along, because this was exactly what he wanted. A few hours before the meetup, the old geezer was getting his ass handed to him. The steward's men had beaten him to a pulp for his failure. For the first time ever, the steward had been embarrassed in front of so many people, and he wasn't about to let that slide. But killing the old man now would be a waste. Their master Zhao still had use for him, because Zhao needed materials to refine his pills. And not just any materials. He needed a true orphan child. And so, the old geezer was to abduct Liang Qiu, to send a clear message that they were not to be messed with, and to secure the rare material Zhao needed. And if he did his job right, he was promised immortality. And that alone made him go absolutely crazy. Crazy enough to accept a power-boosting seal, something that would push his strength far beyond his limits, just for this one mission. With this, the old geezer felt confident that capturing Liang Qiu alive would be easy. But before resorting to brute force, he decided to take a smarter approach, and that is poison. The plan was simple. Lace the soup with a toxin that wouldn't kill. Just weaken Liang Qiu enough to keep him from screaming or resisting. Unfortunately for him, Liang Qiu had zero patience for that. Instead of taking a sip, he chose violence first. With a flick of his hand, a stream of water shot out, and before the old man could react, it wrapped around his head, suffocating him on the spot. He struggled, clawing at the invisible grip tightening around his face. But it was useless. He couldn't even scream if he wanted to. And then, everything went black. The next thing he knew, he was waking up to darkness. Night had fallen, his body ached, his mind spun, and the worst part, he was tied up. Immediately, he asked Liang Qiu what he was planning to do as if he was innocent. But Liang Qiu wasn't buying it. He already got the proof on his hand, and that the old man had been bribed. And with that, Liang Qiu knew exactly what to do. He had the perfect place for people like him, the same spot where they had first encountered the water beast. Except this time the beast belonged to him. The old man wanted him to be a monster so badly. Then he will give him what he wanted. Suddenly the guy had a change of heart. He realized he never wanted Liang Qiu to be a monster. So he apologized profusely and promised to tell him everything if he spare his life. Fortunately for him, Liang Qiu agreed, prompting the old man to spill everything, and that the steward wanted to abduct him. And not just him, other orphans as well. Because to the Zhao mansion, they weren't people. They were materials, used to refine a celestial pill, a pill that could grant immortality. And as soon as this info left from the old man's, he realized how bad it was that he was an accomplice, so to save his skin, he reasoned out that he was a victim too, and that he was only forced to do it. But unfortunately, Liang Qiu didn't care, forced or not. The old bastard already knew too much about him. That alone sealed his fate. No matter what excuse he gave, he wasn't leaving here alive. But that didn't mean he was safe. The Zhao family's influence wouldn't just sit idle. The old man's sudden disappearance would eventually lead them straight to him. And when that happened, he needed a way out. His only option now is to become a cultivator fast. The quickest way to do that is to join a martial arts school. In Pingyang City, there were 3 martial schools, but only one was the strongest. And that is the Yang School. It was said that the master of Yang School possessed a legendary ability, able to break gold and stone with his bare hands. That kind of power and reputation was what kept the school at the top. And if Liang Qiu could join them, then the Zhao family wouldn't dare to touch him so easily. Because if a member of the school disappeared, the Yang School wouldn't just let it slide. The problem now was the requirements. To get accepted, he needed at least 8 taels of silver, and right now, he only had 2, which meant it was time to make more money. With this in mind, he dove into the water to hunt again, and his swimming had improved a lot over the past few days, mostly thanks to his pet, which had become his sparring partner for speed training. Because of this, he developed a technique using his water control energy to compress water beneath his feet as much as possible before releasing it all at once. The problem was that it didn't last long and drained his energy way too fast, so he could only use it for a quick boost. But just when he thought things would go as usual, a peculiar fish appeared. It swam with a bright red glow, definitely a spiritual fish. In this world, some creatures could evolve under the influence of special energy, mutating in unexpected ways. Things like giant scorpion beetles, 2-headed razor-toothed sharks, or iron-fin whales were all prime examples. And right in front of him were 2 spiritual fish, an opportunity he couldn't afford to pass up. So he quickly ordered his croc to lock in, shifting back to its original size to chase one of the fish while he went after the other. With his new technique, he easily caught up, and using his water manipulation to create a bubble that stopped the fish from swimming. Just like that, he caught it without much trouble. But just as he was about to celebrate, something much stronger stirred in the depths. He had just placed the fish in his basket when a massive water beast wrapped around him and slammed him straight into the lake bed. That definitely startled him, but this wasn't the time to pass out. He locked in, only to realize it was the rumored 6-barbed fish that devoured people. And to make things worse, this son of a fish had tricks just like him, forming a massive water orb to attack. Unfortunately for it, Liang Qiu was way more powerful. He shattered the orb before it could even fully charge up, but that only pissed the beast off. It lashed out with its tail. Thankfully, the croc slid in just in time to intercept. And, before the beast could even recover, the croc hit it with a primary lotus special, slamming it straight into the ground. And that's where Liang Qiu came in to capture it with his blood talisman. But it seems like this water beast had way stronger spiritual energy than the croc, and that's when things got messy. Liang Qiu's body started spazzing out, and his system crashed with tons of warning messages about mental overload. But this was now or never. If he backed down, this beast would straight up eat them. So he persisted. His will to live was greater, and in the end, he managed to subdue it. Just like the croc, the beast instantly shrank into a chunky dude to conserve energy, and the best part? It could evolve into a tiger-head whale. Since it was already round and pudgy, he figured chunky was the perfect name. With that taken care of, he went to check on the loot, and sure enough, the croc had captured the other spiritual fish. He gave it a well-deserved head pat, feeling grateful. To celebrate, he decided to cook some fish for them. He also cooked a smaller spiritual fish to see if he could extract some water essence from it, and luckily he did. 18 points worth. That had him ecstatic. If a small spirit fish yielded that much, then a bigger one should give at least triple. That meant he could definitely break past a 10% fusion rate. But as tempting as it was, he also needed money to get into school. So for now, he held back and focused on getting that cash first. But that would be all for today, so tune in next time for more.